Today, let's work on the shield of the Saurus Warrior Alpha. Yeah. Hello, Chris here with another fresh tip for you all. In this video, we are going to work on the shield of the Saurus Warrior Alpha, and we're going to continue our efforts, and we're going to try and maintain theme throughout this model. To get things started, we're going to use some lead belcher, Kroxigor scales. Yes, we are going to mix these, kind of like what we did for the armor, but this time I intentionally want to keep more saturation that we get from the Kroxigor scales, which is this kind of turquoise color. It's got a blue-green kind of thing. After we have thoroughly mixed the lead belcher into, Kroxigor scales into the lead belcher, we begin laying it on top of the primer. Now, the primer is Wraith Bone, the Citadel Spray variety. And we just simply work our way around the model. Now, typically with metallics and even metallics mixed with other colors, you typically want to lay it on top of a black. And I'm just demonstrating this on top of the primer just to show that you can get, good results just laying it right on top of a bright primer. Again, usually with these kinds of videos, I like to, depart from misconceptions and preconceptions of how we paint miniatures. So that's why oftentimes I will do things that seem a little outside the norm, as it were. Again, we're laying this base coat down nice and smooth. We will apply 2 layers onto this model surface. One layer where basically I am not using any thinners on the paint. And then the second layer will be thinned out just a little bit. Just the dampness of the brush, really just to thin the color out. And that just helps, keep it nice and even and smooth. We don't want to build up too heavy a layer on all these areas. And you can see we even did the inside of the shield as well. A lot of times with the inside of the shield, it's just simply pure metallics. So there's not going to be a whole lot of attention drawn to there. Iron breakers next. We're going to use some Alamian medium. We'll slap a little bit onto the palette, add a drop or 2. I think it's just 1 drop we add, and give it a thorough mix. The medium is used instead of water to thin the color down ever so slightly because, well, when you add water to metallics, in my experience, the metallics tend to separate if you oversaturate the mixture with water. The metallic pigment will separate from the acrylic binder that keeps the paint feeling like paint, and that's why I use medium for metallics. I really prefer medium to thin out metallics because, again, it helps keep the paint flowing like paint rather than this kind of really thin, inky kind of mixture. Now, you may notice that we are deliberately applying the highlights towards the bottom portion of details, and this is because we're going for a bit of a non-metallic type of effect. You may have seen this on other models and may have even seen this on other tutorials that I've produced, that we're kind of going for this non-metallic, but we are painting metallics. So it actually adds this kind of double-edged effect on the model surface. When you look at it, it looks like you got a non-metallic metal effect, but then when you look at it in person and you see the way the light plays across the surface, and it really adds to the effect, and it's a lot of fun. I highly recommend giving it a try. Don't be afraid to fail at this a couple times because non-metallic metal tends to trip people up, and so just be mindful. And again, because the paint is thinned out, we are applying it sort of like a glaze. So you'll notice that the brush strokes, I'm finishing the brush stroke where I want the more metallic to gather. Next, we're going to grab some Necron compound. We're going to use a small or a medium dry brush. And again, with these dries, I do really enjoy these. You can see here, we just dunk it into the paintbrush, wipe off the excess. And then initially I was laying it on kind of like an upward motion with the brush stroke, but then I started bringing it just basically across the entirety of the surface. Be sure to keep a very light hand when you dry brush. If you feel the model moving in your hand, you are dry brushing a little too hard, and that's when you get those big streaks, and all you're looking for is just that paint to gather on the edges of surface. That's all we're looking for. We're not looking for big tonal shifts on the broad areas of surface. We're just looking for just to catch edges of details, and that is it. Just the tip of the spikes, tip of the details on the shield, everything like that. Once we're done with that, we're going to come in with some Kroxigor scales. We are going to use some contrast and medium to thin it out just a little bit, actually quite a bit. And we're going to take about half a brush full. So it's a little less than what we've normally been using because I do want to this mixture to be primarily Croxagore scales, and we are going to apply this like a glaze over the entirety of the model's surface details. And if it pulls up and gathers a little too heavily in areas, you just simply wipe the brush off, come in, you can see the brush here has no pigment on it, and we're feathering off the bottom portion so that we're not getting too big a shift on the surface. Again, not to destroy our previous efforts. It's okay if it hits the top edges of stuff because we can reestablish that later. Again, going for this non-metallic metal effect. Now, the basic gist of doing a non-metallic metal effect is the color gets deeper to the higher points, to the upper portions of the model, and it gets brighter towards the bottom. But then you do a little edge highlight around the detail, and that gives that impression of that non-metallic metal. Again, this is a really kind of more or less like a speedy way of doing it. This is it's kind of like illustration when you see heavy metal logos and stuff like that, like where you have this non-metallic metal look, like in logos, like a band, right? Heavy metal, that kind of thing, right? Again, you can see we're just applying the color behind the shield. We don't really concentrate too heavily on what is going on behind the shield because it's just straight up metallics back there, and it's really just, it's a backwards detail, and it's, you don't really see it all that much. And for everybody out there who's doing this for tabletop miniatures, yeah, I mean, like, just paint the back of it. You could even paint it like really, really dark metallics and, not even really worry about it, have a nice shadowy point. But again, you can see we're simply just laying the color down, and then we are feathering it off to create that transition. The other thing to pay attention to is also the horizon line. So the base of the model is your horizon line, so to speak. And that's where you want to kind of use that as a guide where you lay your color on that surface and where you create these gradients. You kind of want that horizon line to be with the base, so it's parallel to the base. And that's what's going to really help sell the illusion that this is a metallic effect, which it's metallic, of course, but that color is getting deeper up towards the top and getting brighter down towards the bottom, as we see in a lot of shorthand type of non-metallic. Croxagore scales all on its lonesome, and here we're just simply going to lay this in really, really heavily up towards the top, very, very minimal. Wash the brush off really, really fast. Here I'm just showing it in real time. Clean brush with a little bit of dampness to it, and then feather that off. Now you got to be a little bit faster than this because otherwise you will end up with some tide marks. But that's okay because you can always come in with more layers and, feather out that tide mark that ends up being there sometimes. Again, if you're, distracted, what have you, unsure, whatever it is, usually something will slow you up when you are trying to do this effect, especially when you're trying to be, somewhat speedy. But again, the speed comes with practice. So again, for all of you out there, who have never really done this kind of technique before, yeah, you're not going to get it the first time. And don't worry if you don't. Just keep trying. Just keep swimming, keep painting, and eventually you will get there. And then people will think, wow, you spend a whole bunch of time painting these miniatures and getting this blend and, all these compliments towards you. And, you'll laugh and say, ha, ha, ha. I didn't spend any time on it. It was a few minutes. And so you can see here with the color, I'm concentrating more color on that tongue detail because I really want that to stand out more. With the non-metallic metal effect on metallics, you can really kind of concentrate where you want the light to gather and light to play. When the contrast dries, it actually dries sort of matte, and so it knocks some of that shine out, which is a plus and a negative. And we had seen it previously with the armor, how, we can knock that saturation out or we can really increase it. And so if this is the kind of technique you like and you want to do this for the armor, well, by all means. Runefang steel is next, no thinners, and this is a just reestablishing that highlight along the bottom portion of the details. And then we're also going to go around and do a slight edge on the upper portions and the sides. Again, pretty much the entirety of the detail will get an edge highlight. The finer and more precise you can be with this edge highlight, the cleaner the look will be when you're finally done the results. So again, here's where you really kind of want to take your time, not rush your way through it. Make sure your brush stays nice and clean and that it comes to a nice fine point. And if you have a brush that comes to a nice fine point, this is going to be done all the better. And if you have like a, kind of a really ratty looking brush, yeah, it's going to be a challenge to try and get these fine edges. Now, again, you can do a very light dry brush to achieve a similar thing. But I find that with the dry brush, especially when you're trying to reestablish that edge highlight on the brighter surfaces, the dry brush will end up hitting over the entirety of the surface and will bring it all down. And that's not what you're really looking for. Again, we want to have maximum visual contrast on that surface. We want really, really dark areas. We want really, really bright areas. And that's what we're doing here. Again, you can see the difference between how heavily saturated the metallic effect here is on the shield as opposed to what we did previously on the armor. Now we're going to jump into some Temple Guard Blue. We're done with the metallics for the moment. We're going to jump over to Temple Guard Blue, Lamian Medium. This is to help thin it down just a little bit. And we're going to base coat the entirety of that inner details. Now we could have used cross-core scales actually, because I kind of liked the way it was looking really thinned out on the really light areas. But I said, no, we're going to just simply base coat this, and we're going to go put this in a more typical fashion in which we paint miniatures. And so with the areas, the paint thinned out, we just simply base coat the areas very, very carefully. I did some of this off camera because, again, it's kind of hard to demonstrate getting precise in there and, getting comfortable and everything like that. So Sotek Green is next. We're going to use some Liquitex Flow-Aid. Now, if you're not familiar with Liquitex Flow-Aid, it is an additive. Well, it's not an additive, but it is a medium for breaking the surface tension of paint. We're going to take some heavy amount of water here into that mixture. We added 2 drops of Flow-Aid. Really, only 1 drop was really necessary. And what this does is it makes the paint act more like contrast paint or like shade paint. And that's what we're looking for. That's the characteristic we want. So we want the color to be very thinned out, bit of water, bit of the Flow-Aid. And then that way the color just falls into the details and goes around details and, gets into the edges. So we got to be careful. It's not like you can just simply, slap this right onto the model surface. You got to be a little bit deliberate. You can see there, sometimes when it gets up on the metal, I just simply use my finger to wipe it away really fast. And, with a lot of these kinds of techniques that I demonstrate here, again, efficiency will generate more speed from you. And, again, when you're more efficient with your brush strokes, you can simply be more deliberate, more careful, and, you don't have to go back and forth all the time trying to clean up your errors and anything like that. Once that's dry, we're going to come in with Stegodon Scale Green. Again, we're going to use some Flow-Aid, just a little bit of Stegodon Green, 2 drops of medium. Again, you probably only need 1. And then we're going to add a fairly generous amount of water. You can see there, the brush is just loaded with water there. We're going to mix that in, use our fine brush, and then we're going to create little deeper shadows on areas. And again, you can see if I hit any of the metallic areas that I don't want to hit, I just simply really fast use my finger to wipe it away. Now with this Stegodon, I initially was laying it on to establish the darker points and the lower areas, because the highlighting we're going to do on this is a fairly typical highlight where the highlights are on the high points of the model. So, if you're looking at it kind of like a north-south kind of thing, we're applying the highlights on the northern areas of details, if that makes sense. With the Shadewash, all I'm doing is applying it in the upper portion of the mouth, in the upper portion of the eyeballs and the face, and everything like that, and trying to get it in the perimeter of the details where the Temple Guard Blue is close to the metallic areas, all that kind of stuff, just creating separation. And I wasn't initially happy with how it looked, and I believe I applied a second layer on the bottom portion of some of those areas. Temple Guard Blue is next. We're going to take some Lamian Medium. We're going to add a drop or 2. This is to help thin it out. Again, I like using mediums because I like the control you get when you are using a medium as opposed to simply using water. Water really kind of breaks the surface tension of the paint versus the medium. The medium allows you to maintain thinness as well as maintain control of the pigment as you are using it more in like this glazing fashion in which you can see I'm demonstrating here. I'm just laying a little bit in. And again, when you are glazing, where you start your brush stroke and where you finish your brush stroke are very important, and you should always be mindful of it. Again, you can see the highlights were built up to the high points, and it's dark at the bottom. Baharoth Blue is next. This is an edge highlight color, or edge paint, I should say. And with this, again, I'm grabbing a detail brush, and all I'm doing is applying an edge highlight on the upper portion of each of those little segments of the detail on the shield, and also on the roundest portion of the shield as well. And we'll lay it in the eyeball and inside the mouth as well. Again, I kind of want to build a little bit brightness into those eyeballs, kind of get some intense kind of glow. And this is the kind of thing I may do for the eyeballs of the warrior himself as well. Or maybe we will go with something else, maybe something a little bit more complementary. White Scar is next. We're going to lay this down. We're going to mix this into the remainder of the Baharoth Blue to get a nice highlight color. This is going to be used just primarily in the eyeballs to build intensity, as well as just at the very top corners of some of those details on the shield as well. So I'll probably just lay just a little bit of dots here and there, but that is it. That is the Temple Guard Saurus Warrior Alpha. That's the shield Azurite metals, these mystical metals that the Temple Guard are using. Temple Guard, I said Temple Guard, but it's Saurus Warrior, Seraphon anyway. But hopefully you guys found that interesting. And again, this kind of stuff you can use on the armor as well if you want to go for this kind of intensity. So don't be afraid to give these ones a try. Big thank you to my patrons. Without your support, these videos would not be possible. If you're considering Patreon support, click the link in the description below. If you're watching this on YouTube, which pretty much everybody is, there's also memberships as well. And so a huge thank you to everybody who takes time to do that. Take care of your brushes, they'll take care of you, and I will see you in the next tutorial.